The glow of the phone screen was the only light in the small apartment at 11:47 p.m. Ellie Dawson sat on the floor of her living room in Denver, her back against the worn couch, legs stretched out on the carpet that desperately needed vacuuming. She hadn't had time to vacuum in 3 weeks. She hadn't had time for anything except work, children, and the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that made her forget what rest felt like. On the couch behind her, Noah and Mia were finally asleep, their small bodies curled together under a faded blue blanket. Noah's forehead was still warm from the fever that had broken an hour ago. Mia's thumb had found its way into her mouth again, a habit Ellie kept meaning to break, but couldn't bring herself to fight about. Not tonight. Not when she'd spent the last 4 hours rotating between cool washcloths, children's Tylenol, and whispered lullabies. She looked at them now, her 3-year-old twins, and felt the familiar mixture of overwhelming love and quiet terror that had defined her life since the day they were born. "You're doing fine," she told herself. "They're fed, they're clean, they're alive. That's enough for today." But it never felt like enough. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Ellie glanced down at the notification, a message from the dating app her coworker Diane had installed on her phone 3 months ago during a lunch break. "You need to get back out there," Diane had said, her voice carrying that particular mixture of concern and pity that Ellie had grown to recognize from everyone who knew her story. "The twins need a father figure." "They have a father," Ellie had replied flatly. "He's just decided that fatherhood was too much responsibility for his lifestyle." She downloaded the app to get Diane off her back. She'd created a profile with a single photo, her in scrubs, hair pulled back, no makeup, dark circles visible, because she didn't have time to take a better one. She'd written a bio that said simply, "ER nurse, no time for games. If you're not serious, swipe left." She hadn't mentioned the twins. That was the one lie she allowed herself. Not a lie exactly, just an omission. A test. Because in the 3 months since she'd created that profile, every single match had disappeared the moment children entered the conversation. Usually within the first 5 messages, sometimes the first 2. "Oh, you have kids? That's great. I'm just not really in a place to be a stepdad right now, you know?" "Wait, twins? Like 2 of them? At the same time? I should have asked earlier. My bad. Good luck, though." Good luck, as if finding someone willing to love not just her, but her children was equivalent to winning the lottery. As if Noah and Mia were obstacles to be overcome rather than the 2 best things that had ever happened to her. So she'd stopped mentioning them until later. Much later. Let the men get to know her first, see her as a person before they saw her as a package deal. It never worked, except this time. This time, she'd matched with someone different. His profile name was GC, no last name. His photo was oddly pixelated, slightly blurry, as if taken from a distance or deliberately obscured. His bio was even shorter than hers, looking for something real. No games, no pretense. They'd been talking for 2 weeks now. Not the shallow small talk that usually dominated dating apps. Not "what's your favorite movie" or "where do you see yourself in 5 years?" Real conversations. About loneliness. About the masks people wear in public. About what it meant to be truly seen by another person. GC had told her that he ran a business. He hadn't said what kind. She'd told him she worked in healthcare. She hadn't said where. They'd both been careful, cautious, circling each other like 2 people who'd been burned before and weren't eager to feel the heat again. But tonight, his message had changed everything. Saturday night, 7 p.m., Bellamy's restaurant. I've made a reservation. Ellie knew Bellamy's. Everyone in Denver knew Bellamy's. It was the kind of place where a single entree cost more than her weekly grocery budget, where businessmen closed deals over wine that was older than she was, where the waitstaff were trained to be invisible and the clientele expected to be noticed. She didn't belong in a place like that, but more importantly, she couldn't go. She looked at Noah and Mia again, their small faces peaceful in sleep. The babysitter she sometimes used had moved to Phoenix last month. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was visiting family in California. And Ellie's parents, well, her parents had been gone for 6 years now, killed by a drunk driver on the same night that her ex-husband had told her he wasn't ready to be a father. She had no one. So she did what she always did. She prepared for rejection. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly from exhaustion and something else, something that felt dangerously close to hope. This is stupid, she thought. He'll disappear like all the others. Better to find out now than to waste more time. She typed the message slowly, each word feeling like a small surrender. I have something to tell you. Something I should have mentioned earlier. I have twin children, 3 years old, Noah and Mia. I don't have anyone to watch them on Saturday, so I have to ask, can I bring them with me? She stared at the message for a long moment. Then, before she could change her mind, she hit send. 3 minutes passed. Ellie watched the screen, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She saw the 3 dots appear, indicating he was typing. Then they disappeared. Then appeared again. Here it comes, she thought. The polite rejection. The excuse about not being ready. The good luck that means goodbye. The message appeared. Of course. I'll change the reservation to a table for 4. Ellie read the message 3 times before she believed it was real. The next morning came too quickly, as mornings always did. At 6:15 a.m., Ellie's alarm shattered whatever thin sleep she'd managed to find. By 6:30, she was in the shower. A 3-minute shower, because that was all the time she could afford. By 6:45, she was waking the twins, changing Noah out of his sweat-damp pajamas, checking Mia's temperature, making mental notes about pediatrician appointments and daycare drop-offs, and the 12-hour shift that waited for her at St. Mercy Hospital. The ER was a war zone that day. A multi-car pileup on I-70 brought in 7 trauma cases before noon. Ellie ran between beds, her sneakers squeaking on linoleum, hands steady, even when her heart raced. She started IVs and monitored vitals and held the hand of a teenager who'd broken 3 ribs and was crying for her mother. She did what she always did. She kept people alive. Her phone buzzed 3 times during her shift. Each time, she ignored it. She couldn't afford distraction when someone's life was literally in her hands. But during her 15-minute lunch break, eaten standing up in the supply closet, the only quiet place she could find, she checked the messages. 2 were from the daycare. Noah had a mild allergic reaction to something at snack time, but they'd given him the antihistamine she'd left in his bag, and he was fine now. 1 was from GC, looking forward to Saturday. The kids can order anything they want. Ellie stared at that message, her half-eaten granola bar forgotten in her hand. Who was this person? She'd been so prepared for rejection that acceptance felt almost suspicious. In her experience, men who seemed too good to be true always were. Her ex-husband had been charming too, in the beginning. He'd said all the right things, made all the right promises. And then, 7 months into her pregnancy, he'd looked at her swelling belly and said, I don't think I can do this. Trust has to be earned, Ellie reminded herself. One nice message doesn't mean anything. But still, she saved the message before putting her phone away. At 7 p.m., Ellie clocked out. By 7:30, she was at the daycare, scooping up Noah and Mia with arms that ached from 12 hours of constant motion. Noah showed her the finger painting he'd made, a blob of blue and green that he proudly announced was Mommy at work. Mia was quieter, clinging to Ellie's neck and whimpering softly, the way she always did after a long day. Hard day, baby girl? Ellie whispered, pressing a kiss to Mia's forehead. Mia just buried her face deeper into Ellie's shoulder. At home, Ellie surveyed the kitchen like a general assessing a battlefield. The fridge contained half a gallon of milk, expired tomorrow, 3 eggs, some questionable lunch meat, and a bag of baby carrots that the twins had rejected so many times she didn't know why she kept buying them. Dinner would be scrambled eggs and toast. Again, while the twins sat in their high chairs, making more mess than progress with their food, Ellie finally allowed herself to think about Saturday. Bellamy's, a fancy restaurant, with her 2 3-year-olds who thought throwing food was a competitive sport. This is insane, she thought. He has no idea what he's signing up for. But he'd said yes. He'd said to bring them. And something in Ellie, something small and stubborn and still capable of hope, wanted to see what happened next. 14 miles away on the 40th floor of the Callahan Tower, Garrett Callahan sat in an office that could have fit Ellie's entire apartment inside it twice. The sun was setting over Denver, painting the Rocky Mountains in shades of gold and purple through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was the kind of view that real estate agents called breathtaking, and investment bankers called worth every penny of the $4.2 million this floor costs annually. Garrett barely noticed it anymore. He was looking at his phone, rereading the message he'd sent an hour ago, wondering if he'd made the right choice. Looking forward to Saturday, the kids can order anything they want. Kids, twin 3-year-olds, a single mother who worked in healthcare and clearly had no idea who he was. That last part was what had drawn him to her in the first place. The dating app had been his assistant, Margaret's idea, another desperate attempt to find what his mother couldn't arrange. Try online dating. Margaret had suggested. Use a different name, don't mention the company. See if anyone's interested in Garrett, not Callahan Dynamics. He'd been skeptical. He was always skeptical. But he'd created the profile anyway, used his initials instead of his name, uploaded a photo that was deliberately blurry enough to be unrecognizable. And then he'd started talking to Ellie. She was different. Real in a way that the women his mother paraded before him never were. When he'd mentioned feeling invisible in crowds, she'd replied, I feel invisible too, but for the opposite reason. I'm so visible that people see right through me to what they actually want. She understood. A knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Callahan? Margaret's voice, efficient and slightly worried. Your 6:30 meeting is waiting. Garrett glanced at the calendar notification on his computer screen. Right. The meeting. Another merger negotiation that would make Callahan Dynamics another $1 billion that Garrett didn't particularly need or want. Send them in, he said. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Garrett participated when required, nodded at appropriate moments, asked the questions his lawyers expected him to ask. But throughout it all, part of his attention remained elsewhere, on a message from a woman who had no idea she was talking to one of Colorado's wealthiest men. At 8:45, when the lawyers finally left, Margaret appeared in the doorway with the expression that meant she had news he wouldn't like. Your mother called, twice. What does she want? She's reminded you that you're expected at the Hendersons' gala tomorrow night. Senator Henderson's daughter will be there. Your mother has arranged for you to be seated together. Garrett felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the sensation that accompanied every interaction with Victoria Callahan. Love and resentment, gratitude and suffocation, all tangled together in ways he'd never been able to untangle. Cancel it. Sir, your mother specifically. I have plans Saturday night. Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly. In the 5 years she'd worked for him, she'd never heard him prioritize anything over his mother's demands. Plans, sir? A dinner reservation for 4. The eyebrows rose higher. 4? Garrett almost smiled. A table for 4, Margaret, at Bellamy's. After Margaret left, no doubt to compose whatever diplomatic excuse would soften the blow of his absence to his mother, Garrett turned back to his window. The city lights were coming on below, a glittering grid of lives being lived. Somewhere down there, a woman named Ellie was probably putting 2 children to bed, probably exhausted after a long shift, probably wondering if she'd made a mistake by trusting a stranger on a dating app. He reached for his phone and typed another message. I should warn you, I'm not very good at small talk, but I'm told I'm excellent at listening, and I have a lot of practice with silence. He hesitated before sending it. The last line was more honest than he usually allowed himself to be with people he'd just met. It hinted at things he rarely discussed. His hearing loss, the way conversations sometimes blurred into unintelligible noise, the lifetime of learning to read lips and context and the spaces between words. But Ellie had been honest with him about her children, about her fears, about the tests she'd given him without knowing she was testing him. He could afford to be honest too. He hit send. Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that made Denver feel like a postcard. Ellie spent the morning cleaning the apartment, not because anyone was coming over, but because the act of cleaning helped calm her nerves. By noon, she'd done laundry, organized the twins' toy chest, and tried on every piece of clothing she owned that wasn't scrubs or pajamas. The dress she finally chose was the only formal thing in her closet, a simple navy blue dress that she'd bought 4 years ago for a cousin's wedding. It still fit, barely. The zipper required some creative breathing. At least it's clean, she thought. Studying herself in the bathroom mirror, and it covers the right parts. That's the most I can hope for. Noah and Mia were more of a challenge. No! Noah screamed when Ellie tried to put him in his good khakis. I want dinosaur shirt. The dinosaur shirt has spaghetti stains on it, buddy. How about this nice blue one? No, dinosaur. Mia, ever the quieter twin, simply went limp when Ellie tried to put her in the pink dress with the tiny flowers. The one she'd bought secondhand that still had the tags on it. Mia, sweetie, please. Mommy needs you to cooperate. Mia's response was to stick her thumb in her mouth and stare at Ellie with enormous, reproachful eyes. In the end, Ellie compromised. Noah got to wear the dinosaur shirt. She'd scrubbed the stains with dish soap until they were mostly invisible, and Mia got to wear her favorite overalls with the butterfly patches. Neither outfit screamed fancy restaurant, but they were clean, and the twins were willing to wear them, which was a victory in itself. By 6:30, Ellie had loaded both kids into their car seats, triple-checked the diaper bag, spare clothes, snacks, sippy cups, the stuffed rabbit Mia couldn't sleep without, and was driving toward Bellamy's with a stomach full of butterflies and a head full of doubts. This is a mistake, she thought, watching the downtown Denver skyline grow larger through her windshield. He's going to take one look at me, at us, and realize he made a terrible mistake. But she kept driving anyway. Bellamy's was even more intimidating than she'd remembered. The restaurant occupied the ground floor of a gleaming glass tower, its entrance marked by a subtle bronze plaque that probably cost more than her car. Through the windows, Ellie could see white tablecloths, candlelight, and the kind of people who wore watches that could pay off her student loans. She parked in the lot. Valet parking would have cost $25 she didn't have, and unloaded the twins. Okay guys, she said, crouching down to their level. We're going to a very nice restaurant tonight. Very nice. That means we use our inside voices, we keep our food on our plates, and we do not throw anything. Understand? Noah nodded solemnly. Inside voices, he repeated. Mia just sucked her thumb and leaned against Ellie's leg. Good. Let's go. She took Noah's hand in her left, positioned Mia on her right hip, and walked toward the entrance. The doorman's expression flickered when he saw her, a microsecond of assessment that took in the off-the-rack dress, the children, the diaper bag slung over her shoulder. He didn't quite sneer, but he didn't quite smile either. Good evening, ma'am. Do you have a reservation? I'm meeting someone. The reservation might be under. She's with me. The voice came from behind her, deep and quiet and somehow certain. Ellie turned. The man standing there was tall, at least 6'2", with dark hair going gray at the temples and eyes the color of a winter sky. He wore a gray suit that fit him like it had been made specifically for his body. It probably had, and he stood with the kind of natural authority that came from a lifetime of being listened to. But it wasn't his height or his suit or his obvious wealth that made Ellie's breath catch. It was the way he was looking at her. Not at her dress, cheap, or her shoes, practical flats, not heels, or her general state of single mother exhaustion. He was looking at her face, directly at it, his eyes focused on her lips in a way that felt intensely personal. GC? She asked, her voice smaller than she intended. He smiled. It transformed his face completely, softened the sharp angles, warmed the cool eyes. Garrett, he said. My name is Garrett Callahan. The name registered dimly in the back of Ellie's mind. Callahan. She'd heard it somewhere before. Callahan, something. A building? A company? She couldn't quite place it. But before she could pursue the thought, Garrett did something that made her forget everything else. He knelt. Right there on the polished marble floor of Bellamy's entrance, in his expensive suit, Garrett Callahan got down on one knee so that he was eye level with Noah and Mia. Hello, he said, his voice gentle but clear. You must be Noah and Mia. I've heard a lot about you. Noah, usually shy with strangers, surprised Ellie by responding immediately. I'm Noah. This is my sister Mia. She doesn't talk much. That's okay, Garrett said. Sometimes listening is better than talking. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced two small objects, tiny toy dinosaurs, one green and one purple. I heard that someone here really likes dinosaurs, he said, holding out the green one to Noah. And I brought one for Mia too, if she wants it. Noah's eyes went wide. For me? For you. Ellie watched, speechless, as her son accepted the toy with the kind of reverent joy usually reserved for Christmas morning. Mia, after a moment's hesitation, reached out from Ellie's hip and took the purple dinosaur, clutching it to her chest. Garrett stood, brushing off his knees as if kneeling on marble floors was something he did every day. "Shall we?" he said, gesturing toward the restaurant interior. Ellie nodded, still unable to form words. The hostess led them to a table in a quiet corner, private but not isolated, with enough space between them and other diners that Noah's inside voice wouldn't disturb anyone. There were already 2 booster seats at the table, placed there with the kind of forethought that didn't happen by accident. "I called ahead," Garrett explained, noticing her look. "Asked them to set things up for children." "You didn't have to. I wanted to." They sat. A waiter appeared, presented menus the size of small novels, and began reciting specials that included words like reduction and foam and deconstructed. Ellie understood maybe half of it. Garrett noticed her expression. "The children's menu is on the back," he said. "But honestly, I recommend the pizza. This place makes the best pizza in Denver." "Pizza?" Ellie blinked. "At a restaurant like this?" "Best kept secret, the chef is Italian. He makes the pizza for his own family, but if you ask nicely, he'll make it for anyone." Mia, who had been quietly playing with her purple dinosaur, suddenly looked up. "Pizza?" It was the first word she'd spoken since they arrived. Garrett's smile widened. "You like pizza, Mia?" A tiny nod. "Then pizza it is." The dinner that followed was unlike anything Ellie had experienced. Garrett didn't ask about her job, though he asked about her patience, carefully navigating HIPAA boundaries to express genuine interest in the human side of her work. He didn't ask about her income or her apartment or her life plans. Instead, he asked about Noah and Mia, what they liked, what they feared, what new words they were learning. "Noah's working on excavator," Ellie said. "He's obsessed with construction equipment." "Excavator," Noah confirmed proudly. "Big yellow digger." "That's exactly right," Garrett said, and the approval in his voice made Noah glow. Halfway through the meal, Noah reached for his water glass and knocked it over. "Orange juice." The waiter had brought juice for the kids, without being asked, splashed across the white tablecloth, spreading in a bright orange stain. Ellie's face went hot. "Oh God, I'm so sorry." She was already reaching for napkins, already composing the apology that would smooth things over, already preparing for the look of disgust that usually accompanied such moments. But Garrett was faster. He grabbed his own cloth napkin, mopped up the spill with quick, efficient movements, and then turned to Noah with a conspiratorial smile. "You know what? When I was your age, I spilled an entire bowl of soup on my grandfather, tomato soup. He was wearing a white shirt. For the rest of his life, he called me the Red Baron." Noah giggled. "Red Baron? It's a pilot from a long time ago, a famous one. My grandfather said I dropped a bomb on him just like the Red Baron dropped bombs on his enemies." Ellie watched, her chest tight with something she couldn't name. This was not how she'd expected tonight to go. Throughout the meal, she noticed something else. Something that explained the intensity of Garrett's gaze, the way he watched her lips when she spoke, the slight tilt of his head toward his right side. When the restaurant grew noisier, when a burst of laughter erupted from a nearby table or a waiter dropped something in the kitchen, Garrett's expression flickered. His focus sharpened, and sometimes he had to ask her to repeat herself. "I'm sorry," he said after the 3rd time. "It's louder in here than I expected." Ellie didn't ask, not yet, but she filed the observation away for later. Near the end of the meal, after Noah had eaten his entire pizza and Mia had managed 3 slices, a record for her, Garrett set down his fork and looked at Ellie directly. "I want to thank you," he said. "For what?" "For the test." Ellie felt her cheeks flush. "I wasn't. You were. And it's okay. I would have done the same thing in your position." His expression was serious now, the easy smile replaced by something deeper. "I know what it's like to wonder if someone is being real with you, to wait for the other shoe to drop. You wanted to know if I would disappear when things got complicated." "And did you think about it? Disappearing?" "No." He said it simply, without hesitation. "I thought about what kind of person shows that kind of courage, who puts her heart on the line like that, and I thought, whoever she is, she's worth meeting." Ellie had no response to that, None that wouldn't involve crying in public anyway. They were interrupted by the waiter arriving with the check. Garrett signed it without looking at the total, a gesture that told Ellie more about his financial situation than any number could have. "Let me contribute," she started. "Absolutely not." "Garrett." "Ellie." He said her name like it meant something. "You brought your children to meet a stranger because you trusted something in our conversations. That took courage. The least I can do is buy you all dinner." Ellie wanted to argue. She'd learned in the years since her divorce that accepting help felt too much like admitting weakness. But something in Garrett's expression stopped her. This wasn't charity. This wasn't pity. This was just kindness. So she said thank you and gathered up the twins' things. They were almost to the exit when it happened. The woman entered Bellamy's like she owned the place, which, given the diamonds at her throat and the Chanel jacket on her shoulders, she very well might have. Her silver hair was cut in a severe bob, her posture was military straight, and her eyes scanned the restaurant with the cold efficiency of a predator surveying potential prey. Those eyes landed on Garrett, then on Ellie, then on Noah, who was holding Garrett's hand. The woman stopped dead. "Garrett." The voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Ellie felt Garrett's entire demeanor change. The warmth that had characterized the evening drained away, replaced by something careful and guarded. "Mother." "Mother?" Ellie's brain caught up with reality too late. Callahan. Garrett Callahan. The Callahan Tower she'd driven past every day on her way to work. Callahan Dynamics, the tech company that employed half of Denver. That Callahan. She was on a date with a billionaire, and his mother was staring at her like she was something that needed to be scraped off the bottom of a very expensive shoe. "What is this?" Victoria Callahan demanded. "Who is this woman?" "Mother, this isn't the place. I asked you a question." Victoria stepped closer, her gaze raking over Ellie with undisguised assessment. The dress, cheap. The shoes, practical. The diaper bag, obvious. "What's your name?" Ellie found her voice. "Ellie Dawson." "And what do you do, Ellie Dawson?" "I'm a nurse at St. Mercy Hospital." "A nurse?" Victoria's lip curled almost imperceptibly. "And these are your children, I assume?" "Yes." "Their father?" "Not in the picture." "How convenient." "Mother." Garrett's voice had turned to ice. "That's enough." "That's enough." Victoria laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. "My son, the sole heir to the Callahan fortune, is in a public restaurant holding hands with a single mother who works for hourly wages, and you tell me that's enough?" The words hit like physical blows. Ellie felt every eye in the restaurant turn toward them. She felt the heat of humiliation climbing her neck, her cheeks, her entire face. But she also felt Noah tug at her hand. "Mommy? Who is the lady?" He was looking up at her with confused, worried eyes. 3 years old. Too young to understand what was happening, but old enough to sense that something was wrong. And in that moment, Ellie made a decision. She would not let her children see her cry. Not here. Not in front of this woman. Not in front of anyone. "No one, sweetheart." She crouched down, forcing her voice to stay steady. "We're just leaving." She straightened, lifted Mia onto her hip, and took Noah's hand. "Ellie," Garrett started. "Thank you for dinner," she said, not looking at him. "It was lovely." She walked toward the exit, her heels clicking on the marble floor, her back straight, her eyes dry through sheer force of will. She did not look back. Garrett stood in the empty space where Ellie had been, watching her disappear through the front door. Watching the best evening he'd had in years walk out of his life. "Well," Victoria said, her voice crisp with satisfaction. "That's settled. Now you need to come with me. The Hendersons are expecting you." Garrett turned to face his mother. He'd spent 34 years accommodating this woman. 34 years of board meetings and arranged dates and strategic relationships. 34 years of being managed like an asset rather than a son. But tonight, for the first time, he'd remembered what it felt like to be treated like a person. "No," he said. Victoria blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said no. I'm not going to the gala. I'm not meeting Senator Henderson's daughter, and I'm not letting you decide who I spend my time with." "Garrett, you humiliated her mother, in public, in front of her children." "I protected you. That woman is a nurse who works 12-hour shifts to support 2 children she's raising alone. She showed more courage in one text message than most people show in their entire lives. And you treated her like she was nothing. Victoria's expression hardened. You've known her for 2 weeks. I've spent 34 years protecting you from people who would take advantage of your situation. My situation? Garrett laughed bitterly. You mean my money or my hearing loss? Both. And which one do you think Ellie cares about? They all care about the money, Garrett, every single one of them. She didn't know who I was. Victoria hesitated. Just for a moment, but Garrett saw it. That's right, he continued. I didn't tell her my last name. I didn't mention the company. For 2 weeks, she talked to me without knowing I was worth billions. She agreed to meet me based on our conversations alone, and she brought her children, her whole heart mother, because she trusted that I was real. Victoria said nothing. You want to know the irony? Garrett asked. I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who can hear perfectly but never listen to a word I say. And tonight I met someone who actually sees me. Not the company, not the money, me. He straightened his jacket, turned and walked toward the exit. Where are you going? Victoria demanded. To fix what you broke. The 3 days following the disaster at Bellamy's were among the longest of Ellie's life. She threw herself into work with a ferocity that worried even Diane, who had been urging her to get out there for months. Honey, you're going to burn out, Diane said on the second day, watching Ellie take her 4th consecutive shift. No one can work this many hours. I'm fine, Ellie replied, already moving toward the next patient. She wasn't fine. But exhaustion was easier than thinking. At night, after the twins were asleep, Ellie would sit in the dark of her living room and replay the scene at Bellamy's in her mind. The look on Victoria Callahan's face, the words that had cut like surgical instruments, the weight of every eye in the restaurant, assessing her, judging her, finding her wanting. Single mother who works for hourly wages. How convenient. She deleted the dating app from her phone, deleted her message history with GC. With Garrett, there was no point in keeping it. Whatever had started between them had ended the moment his mother walked through that door. On the 3rd evening, Ellie was sitting in the nurse's station trying to stay awake through the last hour of her shift when a commotion near the entrance caught her attention. Sir, visiting hours are over. You can't just... I'm not here to visit a patient. Ellie's head snapped up. Garrett Callahan stood in the doorway of the ER, looking wildly out of place in his business attire among the fluorescent lights and worried families. In his hands he held a small box, not flowers, not jewelry, but a box decorated with cartoon dinosaurs. I'm here to see Ellie Dawson, he said to the flustered receptionist. Please. Ellie should have stayed hidden, should have asked someone else to tell him she wasn't available. But her feet were already moving, carrying her toward him before her brain could object. Garrett? What are you doing here? He turned at the sound of her voice, and something in his expression shifted. Relief, maybe, or hope. I'm not here to see you, he said. Ellie blinked. Then why? I'm here to tell Noah that the pizza at other places is also pretty good, and to give him these. He held up the box. Dinosaur cookies. I remembered you said he liked them. How do you know about? You mentioned it. 2 weeks ago. A message about how hard it is to find good dinosaur-shaped treats. I found a bakery that makes them. Ellie stared at the box, then at Garrett, then back at the box. She had mentioned that, an offhand comment in the middle of a longer conversation about the small things that made parenting both exhausting and worthwhile. He'd remembered. You drove all the way to a hospital, she said slowly, to bring dinosaur cookies to a 3-year-old you met once. And to apologize. For what? You didn't. Yes, I did. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I should have warned you. About who I am. About my mother. I let you walk into a situation without all the information, and you got hurt because of it. Garrett? I also should have gone after you, that night. Instead of standing there while you left, I've regretted it every minute since. Ellie looked at him, really looked, past the expensive suit and the carefully styled hair. She saw the uncertainty beneath the confident facade. The vulnerability he was trying to hide behind polished words. Your mother was right about one thing, Ellie said quietly. I don't belong in your world. You're right. You don't. He smiled slightly at her look of shock. My world is board meetings and shareholder reports and endless dinners with people who want something from me. It's exhausting and hollow, and I've been sleepwalking through it for years. Then why? Because your world is what I want. The noise, the mess, the chaos of two small children learning how to be human. That's real. That's alive. He held her gaze. That's worth fighting for. Ellie wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him, but wanting and believing were two different things. I can't, she whispered. Can't what? Can't do this again. Can't let my children get attached to someone who might disappear. Can't, her voice broke. Can't risk them getting hurt. What about you? What about me? Aren't you tired of protecting yourself so much that you never let anyone in? The question hit her like cold water. Because yes, she was tired. So tired of carrying everything alone, of being strong when she had no strength left, of building walls so high that no one could climb them, including herself. But admitting that felt like defeat. I should get back to work, she said. Garrett nodded slowly. I understand. But Ellie, he held out the box of dinosaur cookies. At least let me give him these. He doesn't deserve to miss out because of what's happening between us. Ellie hesitated. Then, slowly, she took the box. Thank you. You're welcome. He turned to leave, then paused. I'll be at City Park tomorrow afternoon, the section near the duck pond, around 2 p.m., in case you change your mind. He was gone before she could respond. Ellie didn't intend to go to City Park. She told herself that all morning, as she made breakfast for the twins and cleaned the apartment and tried not to think about Garrett Callahan standing in the ER with a box of dinosaur cookies. She told herself that as she dressed Noah and Mia in their jackets and loaded them into the car for what was supposed to be a trip to the grocery store. She told herself that even as she drove past the grocery store, past her apartment complex, past every logical destination, and towards City Park. It was a beautiful afternoon. October in Denver, the sky impossibly blue, the leaves on the trees turned to gold and copper and red. Families dotted the green spaces, parents pushing strollers, children chasing each other, dogs barking at nothing in particular. She found Garrett sitting on a bench near the duck pond, a bag of breadcrumbs on his lap. You came, he said. I brought the kids. They like ducks. I brought food. He held up the breadcrumbs. For the ducks. And he reached into a bag beside him. Snacks for humans, too. Noah, spotting the ducks, immediately began tugging at Ellie's hand. Mommy, ducks, can we feed them? Garrett held out the breadcrumbs. Would you like to do the honors? Noah's eyes went wide. He looked at Ellie for permission. She nodded, and he snatched the bag with the enthusiasm of a kid who'd just been handed treasure. Mia, come on, he shouted, already running toward the water. Mia hesitated, clinging to Ellie's leg, but when Garrett crouched down to her level, the same way he had at the restaurant, something in her seemed to relax. Would you like me to show you how to throw the bread? He asked her gently. A tiny nod. Okay. Hold out your hand like this. He demonstrated with his own hand, moving slowly so she could follow. Then you throw, like you're giving the duck a present. Mia watched with solemn concentration. Then she toddled toward the pond, following her brother, purple dinosaur still clutched in her free hand. Ellie watched them go, her throat tight. You're good with them, she said. I like them. They're honest. Kids don't pretend to be something they're not. They sat in silence for a moment, watching Noah demonstrate his bread-throwing technique to Mia with the seriousness of an Olympic coach. Can I tell you something? Garrett asked. Okay. I lost my hearing when I was 12. Ellie turned to look at him. His expression was calm, but his hands were clasped tightly in his lap. The only sign that this admission wasn't easy. Bacterial meningitis, he continued. I survived, which was apparently remarkable. But the infection damaged my auditory nerves. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. My father said I was defective. Garrett. He left 6 months later. Couldn't handle having a son who wasn't perfect. My mother stayed, not because she loved me, I don't think, but because she refused to let him win. He smiled grimly. She's been trying to control every aspect of my life ever since. She says it's protection. She says the world will take advantage of me if she doesn't vet every person who gets close to me. Is that why she reacted the way she did? At the restaurant? Partly. She's also afraid that someone will only want me for the money, and afraid that if I choose someone she didn't approve of, it means her 22 years of protection were worthless. That doesn't excuse what she said. No, it doesn't. He turned to face her fully. But I wanted you to understand, my mother isn't evil. She's afraid, and fear makes people do terrible things. Ellie considered this. She thought about the years after her parents' death, when fear had driven her into a marriage with a man who seemed stable and safe. How fear had kept her in that marriage, even when it became clear he didn't love her, didn't want the children they'd created together. Fear was a monster that wore many faces. My husband left when I was 7 months pregnant, she said. The words came out before she could stop them. He said he'd made a mistake, said he wasn't ready to be a father. He packed a suitcase and walked out while I was standing in the kitchen, too pregnant to chase him, even if I'd wanted to. Garrett said nothing, but he turned toward her fully, giving her his complete attention. I gave birth alone, raised them alone, and every single day I'm terrified that I'm not enough, that they'll grow up damaged because they didn't have a father, that I'm failing them in ways I can't even see. You're not failing them. How do you know? Because I saw them at dinner. They're happy, Ellie. They're secure. They know they're loved. He shook his head. I would have given anything to feel that secure as a child. You've given them something my money could never buy. Ellie's eyes burned. She blinked rapidly, refusing to cry. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Any of this. Dating, trusting, letting someone into our lives. Then let me show you something. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small device. His hearing aid, she realized. He turned it in his fingers. There are days when this doesn't help, when everything sounds like static, or the batteries die, or the world just gets too loud. On those days, I have another language. Another language? Instead of answering verbally, Garrett raised his hands and began to sign. Ellie didn't know ASL, but she recognized what he was doing. His hands moved gracefully, forming shapes and patterns that clearly meant something. What did you say? She asked. I said, thank you for trusting me. Across the pond, Noah's voice carried over the water. Mommy, the ducks ate all the bread. Then we should probably get more, Ellie called back. She turned to Garrett. Will you teach them? Teach them what? That. She gestured to his hands. The signs. If you're going to be around, they should learn to communicate with you, in every way possible. Garrett's expression shifted, surprise, then understanding, then something that looked almost like hope. Does this mean you're giving me a second chance? Ellie stood, brushing off her jeans. It means I'm giving all of us a chance. But Garrett, yes? If you hurt them, if you walk away like their father did, I will never forgive you. I understand. Do you? More than you know. She held his gaze for a long moment, then slowly she offered her hand. He took it. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Ellie had experienced. Garrett didn't try to buy his way into her life. He didn't show up with extravagant gifts or propose expensive outings. Instead, he appeared in small ways, ordinary ways, weaving himself into the fabric of her daily existence. He came to the apartment on weekday evenings after Ellie's shifts and helped with dinner. Not fancy dinners, macaroni and cheese from a box, grilled cheese sandwiches, the simple foods that 3-year-olds would actually eat. He sat at her second-hand table with mismatched chairs and acted like it was the finest restaurant in Denver. He learned Noah's bedtime routine. 2 stories, 1 song, a specific arrangement of stuffed animals on the pillow. He learned that Mia needed to be rocked for exactly 3 minutes before she would consent to being put in her crib. And he taught them signs. It started simply. Basic words like more and please and thank you. Noah picked them up quickly, his small hands forming shapes with more enthusiasm than accuracy. He would practice at random moments, signing water when he wanted a sippy cup, signing sleep when Mia was rubbing her eyes. He treated it like a game, a secret code that he and Garrett shared. Mia was slower, more careful. She watched Garrett's hands with intense concentration, her brow furrowed, her lips pressed together in determination. She wouldn't attempt a sign until she was sure she had it right. She's a perfectionist, Garrett observed one evening, watching Mia practice the sign for duck over and over in front of the bathroom mirror. She gets that from her father, Ellie said, then stopped. I mean, her biological father. He was. You can talk about him, Garrett said gently. He's part of their story, even if he's not part of their lives. Ellie was quiet for a moment. He was obsessive about getting things right. Grades, career, image, everything had to be perfect or it didn't count. I think that's why he left. He couldn't handle the imperfection of real life. His loss, their loss too. Garrett nodded, acknowledging the truth of that. Some wounds didn't heal just because better things came along. But when Mia finally mastered the sign for love, thumb, pinky, and index finger extended, she used it constantly, signing it at Ellie, at Noah, at her stuffed animals, at the ducks in the park. And every time she did, something in Ellie's chest loosened a little more. One afternoon, Garrett brought over a children's book specifically designed to teach ASL. It had bright illustrations and clear photographs of each sign, and Noah and Mia fought over who got to hold it. "There's something I want to show you," Garrett said to Ellie while the twins were absorbed in the book. "Something important." He led her to the kitchen out of the children's earshot. "When I was 13, the year after I lost my hearing, I tried to kill myself." Ellie's hand flew to her mouth. "I'm okay now," he said quickly, "obviously. But I want you to know because it's part of who I am. Part of why I understand loneliness the way I do." "Garrett?" My father had just left. My mother was consumed with her own grief, and I couldn't participate in conversations, couldn't enjoy music, couldn't do any of the things that had made me feel connected to the world. I felt like I'd become invisible. Ellie recognized that word. Invisible. The same word she'd used to describe herself at Bellamy's. "What saved you?" she asked. "A therapist at the hospital. She was deaf too. Completely deaf from birth, and she taught me that being deaf didn't mean being less. It just meant being different. She taught me that sign language wasn't a substitute for hearing. It was its own language, its own culture, its own way of being in the world." He paused, his eyes distant. "She told me something I've never forgotten. She said, 'The world will try to make you feel broken, but you're not broken. You're whole in a different way. And someday, you'll find people who see that wholeness instead of the missing pieces.'" Ellie's eyes were wet. "Did you find them, those people?" "I'm looking at one right now." From the living room, Noah's voice, "Mom, Mia knows how to say book now." They went back to the children, the moment preserved like a photograph in Ellie's memory. Another piece of Garrett revealed. Another thread binding them together. One evening, Garrett was reading to both children on Ellie's worn couch when Ellie paused in the doorway of the kitchen. She watched Garrett speak the words of "Goodnight Moon" aloud, while simultaneously signing them, his voice and hands working in harmony. Noah was trying to copy the signs, his face scrunched in concentration. Mia sat tucked against Garrett's side, not signing but watching his hands with rapt attention. This was what she'd wanted for them. Not wealth or privilege or fancy restaurants, just this, someone who showed up, someone who stayed. A week later, Garrett gave Noah a gift. It was an old watch, simple, leather-banded, clearly worn from years of use. Noah held it in his small hands like it was made of gold. "This was my father's," Garrett said. "He gave it to me before he left. It's the only thing of his I kept." Ellie's heart clenched. "Garrett, you don't have to. I want to." He crouched down to Noah's level. "My father gave me this watch, and then he went away. For a long time I was angry at him for leaving. But you know what I learned?" Noah shook his head, transfixed. "I learned that things can't replace people. This watch didn't make me miss my father less, but it reminded me of something important. Time doesn't wait for anyone. If there's something that matters to you, something you love, you have to hold on to it. You have to fight for it." He helped Noah strap the watch onto his small wrist. It was comically oversized, but Noah didn't seem to notice. "I'm giving this to you because you remind me to fight for what matters. You and your sister and your mom, you're what matters now." Noah threw his arms around Garrett's neck. "I'll take good care of it, I promise." "I know you will, buddy." Ellie turned away, pretending to check something in the kitchen so they wouldn't see her cry. "You're staring." Garrett's voice startled her. He was looking over his shoulder, an amused smile playing at his lips. "Sorry, She stopped, unable to find the words. "What? You're good at this? At reading children's books? At being here?" Something shifted in his expression. The amusement faded, replaced by something softer. "I never had this," he said quietly. Growing up, my father left, my mother managed. No one just sat with me, read to me, made me feel like I mattered. That's why you're so good at it. You know what it's like to want it. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then Noah tugged at his sleeve, the hat demanding he turn the page, and the moment passed. But Ellie filed it away. Another piece of the puzzle that was Garrett Callahan. The first sign of trouble came 3 weeks into their tentative relationship. Ellie came home from a particularly brutal shift, a pediatric trauma case that had ended badly, the kind that haunted her for days afterward, to find the twins playing in the living room with their nanny, Mrs. Patterson, whom Garrett had hired, over Ellie's initial objections, to help with childcare. Mrs. Patterson? I thought you were off today. The older woman's expression was carefully neutral. A woman came by this afternoon, Miss Dawson. She asked me questions about you and the children, about Mr. Callahan's visits. Ellie's blood went cold. What woman? She didn't give her name, but she was very thorough. That night, Ellie told Garrett. His reaction confirmed her fears. My mother, he said, his voice flat. She's having you investigated. Investigated? It's what she does. Anyone who gets close to me, she digs into their past. Finances, relationships, anything she can use as leverage. Leverage for what? To make them go away. Ellie felt sick. The idea of Victoria Callahan picking through her life, her debts, her divorce, her struggles, was violating in a way she couldn't articulate. What does she expect to find? Anything that proves you're not good enough for me, or rather, not good enough for the Callahan name. And if she doesn't find anything? Garrett's expression darkened. Then she'll create something. Victoria's first move came a week later. Ellie was called into the office of St. Mercy's chief of medicine, a man she'd spoken to maybe twice in her entire career, and informed that a complaint had been filed against her. A complaint? Anonymous, alleging neglect of patient care, falsification of records, and professional misconduct. Ellie's world tilted. That's impossible. I'm not saying I believe it, Miss Dawson. Dr. Roberts looked genuinely uncomfortable. But the complaint was accompanied by a substantial donation to the hospital. The board has requested a formal investigation. A donation? From whom? Anonymous. Of course it was. Ellie walked out of that meeting in a daze. She was being suspended pending investigation. No pay, no benefits. 2 children to feed and rent to pay, and the woman who was supposed to love her son was trying to destroy her. She didn't cry until she got to her car. Then she sobbed so hard she couldn't drive for 20 minutes. When she finally pulled herself together enough to go home, she found Garrett waiting in her apartment. Mrs. Patterson had let him in. I heard, he said. I'm so sorry. How did you? I have people watching my mother. I know everything she does. His expression was anguished. I never thought she'd go this far. She's trying to take away my ability to support my children, my career, everything I've built. I know, and I'm going to fix it. How? I'll confront her. Tell her to stop. Ellie laughed bitterly. And you think she'll listen? She'll have to. I'll threaten to leave the company, to give away my inheritance, to... No. Ellie stood up, pacing the small living room. I won't let you destroy your relationship with your mother because of me. Ellie, and even if you did, even if she backed off, Ellie's voice cracked. She was right, Garrett. About one thing. What? Your world and my world, they don't fit together. They never will. That's not true, isn't it? Look at us. You live in a penthouse. I can barely make rent. You wear suits that cost more than my car. I shop at Goodwill. You have power, connections, resources. I have nothing. Your mother is right. I have nothing to offer you except problems. Garrett moved toward her, his expression fierce. You offer me everything. You offer me authenticity and warmth and a family, a real family. That's worth more than all the money in the world. Tell that to my landlord when I can't pay rent. Let me help. No. Why? Because if I take your money, your mother wins. She gets to say I was only after your fortune. I won't give her that satisfaction. They stood in silence, the weight of unsolvable problems pressing down on both of them. Finally, Garrett spoke. What do you want me to do? I don't know. Ellie sank onto the couch. I honestly don't know. The next week was a blur of sleepless nights and mounting dread. Ellie applied for other nursing jobs, but word seemed to have spread. No one was hiring someone under investigation for patient neglect. She dipped into her meager savings, calculated how long she could stretch it, and came up with an answer she didn't want to face. 3 weeks. Maybe 4, if she stopped buying anything but essentials. After that, she didn't know. She started packing. Not because she had anywhere to go, but because the act of putting things in boxes felt like doing something. Better than sitting still and waiting for disaster. Garrett came by every day. He watched her pack, helped where she let him, and didn't try to convince her to stop. He understood, she realized, that she needed to prepare for the worst, even if he was still fighting for the best. On the 6th night of her suspension, Mia developed a fever. At first, Ellie wasn't worried. Children got fevers all the time. She gave Mia some children's Tylenol, checked her temperature every hour, waited for it to break. It didn't break. By midnight, Mia was burning up. Her tiny body shook with chills, even as sweat soaked her pajamas. And then came the moment that would haunt Ellie's nightmares for years. Mia began to seize. Ellie called 911 with hands that shook so badly she almost dropped the phone. The ambulance took forever. Noah woke up, saw his sister thrashing on the floor, and began to scream. Ellie couldn't comfort him because she couldn't let go of Mia. Couldn't stop trying to keep her safe while her body did things no 3-year-old's body should do. "It's okay, baby. It's okay," Ellie kept saying, even though it wasn't okay. Even though she was lying to her son and her daughter and herself. "Mommy's here. Mommy's got you." The paramedics arrived after what felt like hours but was probably 7 minutes. They worked efficiently, professionally, asking questions that Ellie answered on autopilot while her brain screamed in terror. "Any allergies?" "No, I mean Noah has a mild peanut allergy, but Mia doesn't." "When did the seizures start?" "I don't know. 5 minutes ago? Maybe more?" "Has she had seizures before?" "Never. This has never." Her voice broke. One of the paramedics, a woman about Ellie's age, put a hand on her shoulder. "We've got her. She's going to be okay." Ellie wanted to believe that. She needed to believe that. They took Mia to St. Mercy, the hospital where Ellie had worked, where she was now forbidden to work, where the woman behind her destruction had probably never set foot in her life. The ER was bright and busy and familiar in all the wrong ways. Ellie knew these hallways. She'd walked them thousands of times, treating other people's emergencies. Now she was on the other side, helpless, terrified, waiting for news about her own child. Noah sat on her lap in the waiting room, too scared to let go of her. He clutched the watch Garrett had given him, the one that was too big for his wrist, and stared at the door through which his sister had disappeared. "Is Mia going to be okay?" he asked for the 5th time. "The doctors are taking care of her, sweetheart." "But is she going to be okay?" Ellie didn't know. That was the worst part. She didn't know. Ellie sat in the waiting room with Noah on her lap and no one to help her. She had no insurance, no income, no husband to share the terror. Her parents were dead. Her ex-husband was gone. She was completely, devastatingly alone. And somewhere across the city, Victoria Callahan was probably sleeping peacefully in her mansion, satisfied that her plan was working. Ellie looked at Noah, small and frightened, clutching the watch that Garrett had given him weeks ago, a gift that had become his most treasured possession, and made a decision. She would call Victoria. She would accept whatever money the woman offered. She would disappear from Garrett's life. She would do anything, anything at all, if it meant her children would be safe. She pulled out her phone, searched for Callahan Dynamics contact information, and prepared to surrender. The ER doors burst open before she could make the call. Garrett strode through, his face pale with fear, his hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. He wasn't alone. Behind him came a woman in her 60s, silver-haired but with kind eyes, wearing the unmistakable white coat of a physician. "Where is she?" Garrett demanded, scanning the waiting room until his eyes found Ellie. "Where's Mia?" "How did you?" "Mrs. Patterson called me. She tried calling you first but couldn't get through." Ellie looked at her phone. The battery was dead. She'd forgotten to charge it in the chaos. "This is Dr. Helen Marquez," Garrett continued, gesturing to the woman beside him. "She's head of pediatrics here, and she's the best." Dr. Marquez was already moving toward the nurse's station. "I'll find out where she is. Don't worry, we'll take care of her." Ellie watched her go, too overwhelmed to protest. Then she turned to Garrett. and everything she'd been holding back crashed through her defenses. "I was going to call your mother," she whispered. "I was going to give up, take her money, and disappear. I couldn't see any other way." Garrett pulled her into his arms. She broke against him, sobbing into his shoulder, her whole body shaking with exhaustion and fear and relief. "You don't have to disappear," he said into her hair. "You don't have to do anything alone anymore. But your mother, I'll deal with my mother." "How?" "I'll figure it out. But right now," he pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. "Right now, the only thing that matters is Mia. Let me help, please." Ellie nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Marquez's diagnosis came an hour later. An ear infection that had gone septic. Serious, but treatable. Mia would need IV antibiotics and observation, but she would be okay. Ellie sobbed with relief. In the days that followed, while Mia recovered, Garrett made his move. He confronted Victoria not at home, where she had the advantage, but at Callahan Dynamics headquarters, in front of the board of directors. "I'm resigning," he announced. The room erupted. Victoria, seated at the head of the table, went white. "You can't," she said. "You're the CEO. You're my son. Yes, I'm your son, not your puppet." Garrett's voice was steady, even as his hands trembled beneath the table. "For 34 years, you've controlled every aspect of my life. Who I meet, who I date, who I'm allowed to love. And for 34 years, I've let you, because I was afraid. Afraid that if I didn't obey, you'd leave me too, the way my father did. I've only ever tried to protect you. You've tried to own me." Garrett stood, facing the room full of people who had watched him grow up, who had known him as a boy, and now saw him as a man fighting for something more important than profit margins. "And I'm done being owned." "If you leave this company," Victoria said, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury, "you leave with nothing. I'll see to it." "Then I leave with nothing." Garrett looked at his mother, and for the first time, he felt something like pity for her. "You spent 22 years protecting me from people who might use me, but you never considered that you might be using me yourself, to fill the hole that father left when he walked out." Victoria flinched as if struck. "I love you, Mother, but I won't let you destroy the first real thing I've ever had. Either you accept Ellie and her children as part of my life, or you lose me entirely. Your choice." He walked out of the boardroom without waiting for her answer. Victoria didn't call him for a week. Then one afternoon, she showed up at Ellie's apartment. Ellie opened the door to find the woman who had tried to destroy her standing in the hallway, looking somehow smaller than she had at Bellamy's. Older, more uncertain. "May I come in?" Every instinct screamed no. But something in Victoria's expression, a vulnerability that Ellie recognized, made her step aside. They sat in the living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes and children's toys. Victoria looked around at the modest space with an expression that might have been disdain, but might have been something else entirely. "He was all I had," Victoria said finally. "After his father left, Garrett was all I had, and then he got sick, and he lost his hearing, and I thought—" She stopped, pressing a hand to her mouth. "You thought you'd lose him too," Ellie finished. "I thought everyone would try to take him from me. His father tried to take him in the divorce. Business rivals tried to use him. Women tried to manipulate him." Victoria's eyes were wet. "I'd been so afraid for so long that I forgot what it felt like to not be afraid." "Fear makes us do terrible things," Ellie said. "I know. I've been afraid too. Garrett told me about your husband, about raising the children alone." Victoria looked at her directly for the first time. "I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually." "Yes, you do. The investigation has been dropped. I made some calls. Your position at St. Mercy has been restored." Ellie stared at her. "Just like that? My influence extends in many directions. I used it against you. It seemed only right to use it for you as well." They sat in silence. Then Noah's voice floated in from the bedroom. "Mommy, Mia took my dinosaur." Normal life, intruding on extraordinary moments. Victoria stood. "I should go?" "Mrs. Callahan, Victoria, please." Ellie hesitated. "Victoria, this doesn't make everything okay. What you did, it can't just be erased." "I know, but I'm hoping it can be a start." She walked to the door, then paused. "He's happy, with you, happier than I've ever seen him." She didn't turn around. "Don't let my mistakes cost him that happiness." She was gone before Ellie could respond. 6 months later, City Park, Denver. The same bench by the duck pond where everything had started to change. Ellie sat with Garrett, watching Noah and Mia chase ducks across the grass. The children had grown so much in half a year, taller, more coordinated, more articulate. Noah was learning to read now. Mia, who had been so quiet and reserved, had found her voice. Garrett held Ellie's hand, his thumb tracing absent patterns on her skin. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For sending that message. The test. For taking a chance on a stranger who might have disappeared." Ellie smiled. "Thank you for not disappearing." Noah came running over, his face flushed with excitement. His hands moved in rapid signs. "Uncle Gare, the ducks are swimming. There's one with babies." Garrett responded in kind, his hands fluid and graceful. "Baby ducks are called ducklings. How many are there?" Noah signed back. "I'll count," and took off toward the pond again. Mia followed more slowly, but when she reached Garrett, she climbed into his lap without hesitation. She pressed her small hand against his cheek and said, clearly and confidently, "Love you, Uncle Gare." Garrett's eyes glistened. He pressed a kiss to her forehead and signed back, "Love you too." Ellie leaned her head against his shoulder. "I never thought that test message would lead to this, and I never thought Table for Four would change my entire life." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children, because that's what Noah and Mia had become, their children, belonging to both of them in the ways that mattered, play in the autumn sunshine. "Garrett? I'm not testing you this time, but I need to ask you something." He turned to look at her, curiosity in his eyes. "Will you stay? Not just for dinner, not just for the hard parts, but for everything? Forever?" Garrett reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a ring, not a diamond, not ostentatious, but simple silver with an inscription on the inner band. 4 people, 1 table. Ellie's breath caught. "I've had this for 2 months," he said. "I've been waiting for you to ask." Tears streamed down her face, but she was laughing too, overwhelmed by a joy she hadn't known she was still capable of feeling. "Is that a yes?" she managed. "It's always been yes. From the moment I typed Table for 4, it's been yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger. Noah came running back, having apparently finished his duck count. He saw his mother crying and immediately looked concerned. "Mommy? Why are you crying?" Ellie pulled him into a hug, Mia still on Garrett's lap, until all 4 of them were tangled together on the park bench. "Because I'm happy, sweetheart." Noah considered this. Then he signed it Garrett with careful, deliberate movements. "Family?" Garrett signed back, his voice cracking as he spoke the word aloud too. "Family." 1 year later. The Callahan-Dawson wedding was not what anyone expected. No grand ballroom, no society pages, no 300-person guest list of business associates and political connections. Instead, City Park, next to the duck pond. 50 chairs set up on the grass. Noah serving as ring bearer, Mia as flower girl. Dr. Helen Marquez in attendance, along with Diane from the hospital, Mrs. Patterson, and a handful of friends who had become family in the truest sense. Victoria Callahan sat in the front row, her expression complex and unreadable. Things were not perfect between her and Ellie, might never be perfect, but they were better. She'd learned to knock before entering, to ask before interfering, to trust that her son knew his own heart. It was progress. It was enough. The ceremony was short. Garrett and Ellie had written their own vows. "I promise," Ellie said, her voice steady, "to always tell you the truth, even when it's hard. To bring my whole self to our life together, the tired parts and the hopeful parts and the scared parts. To love your silence as much as your words. To build something real." "I promise," Garrett replied, signing and speaking simultaneously so that everyone present could understand. "To stay. Not just for the good parts, but for all of it. To be a father to Noah and Mia and any children who come after. To build a table big enough for whoever needs a seat. To spend the rest of my life answering that first question, yes, you can bring them. You can always bring them." They kissed to applause and cheering and Noah's enthusiastic shout of, "Gross!" At the reception, a picnic on the grass with food from Ellie's favorite food truck and cake that Noah had helped decorate, Garrett gave a toast. "A year ago, a woman I'd never met sent me a message that changed everything. She asked if she could bring her children to our first date. It was a test, and I almost failed it. I almost said no. I almost let fear decide for me. But something made me say yes. Something told me that this was different, that she was different, that whatever came next would be worth the risk. I was right. So here's to tests, here's to chances, here's to the moments when we choose love over fear, and here's to tables for four. He raised his glass, looking at Ellie and Noah and Mia. That turned into tables for forever. 5 years later, the Callahan Foundation for Accessible Healthcare occupied a building in downtown Denver, not far from St. Mercy Hospital, where it had all started. Ellie served as executive director, overseeing programs that provided medical care to families who couldn't afford it, regardless of their circumstances. Single mothers were a particular focus. So were children with disabilities. Garrett had stepped back from Callahan Dynamics, taking a consulting role that let him spend more time with his family. He taught sign language classes twice a week at a local community center. He coached Noah's soccer team. He read bedtime stories to Mia every night, always in 2 languages. Noah was 8 now, already showing signs of his mother's compassion and his stepfather's determination. He wanted to be a doctor when he grew up, specifically one who helped kids like his sister. Mia, at 8 years old, had been diagnosed with mild hearing loss, a late effect, the doctors said, of the infection that had nearly killed her at 3. She wore hearing aids now, bright purple ones that she'd chosen herself, and she'd become fluent in ASL long before the diagnosis. "It's okay," she'd told her worried parents when they'd gotten the news. "Uncle Garrett taught me. I already know how to talk without hearing." She'd saved them the grief of a hard transition. She'd given them a gift they hadn't known they needed. Victoria came for dinner every Sunday. She was gentler now, slower, humbled by years of learning that control was not the same as love. She still drove Ellie crazy sometimes. She still said the wrong thing. But she tried, and trying counted for something. On a warm evening in late spring, the whole family gathered in the backyard of their home. Not a mansion, but a comfortable house with a big yard and a room for each child, and enough space for everyone who needed it. Garrett stood at the grill, arguing with Noah about proper burger technique. Mia sat on the grass, signing an elaborate story to her grandmother, who was learning ASL at 73 and terrible at it, but trying anyway. Ellie watched them all from the patio, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Twins again, due in 3 months. She'd been terrified when she'd found out, all the old fears rushing back, all the memories of doing this alone. But she wasn't alone anymore. She'd never be alone again. Garrett caught her eye across the yard. He smiled, that same smile she'd seen in the entrance of Bellamy's, the one that transformed his whole face. He signed to her, quick and casual and full of love. "Table for 6 now?" She signed back. "Make it 7, just in case." He laughed. Noah looked up from the grill, curious. "What did Mom say?" "She said she loves us." "That's not what her hand said." "Smart kid." Garrett ruffled his son's hair. "Fine, she said to make the table bigger." Again. Noah grinned. "I'll get more chairs." He ran off to the garage, Mia following him, Victoria calling after them not to run with furniture. Ellie walked over to Garrett, sliding her arms around him from behind. "Thank you," she said into his shoulder. "For what?" "For answering that message. For choosing us." He turned in her arms, pulling her close. "Thank you for sending it. For testing me. Best test I ever failed. Best answer I ever gave." They stood together as the sun set over Denver, painting the sky in colors that matched the joy in their hearts. Somewhere behind them, Noah was arguing with Mia about who got to set the extra chairs. Victoria was making suggestions no one asked for. The dogs from next door were barking at something invisible. Life was loud and messy and imperfect. It was everything. And that's how one test message, "Can I bring my twins?" became a table for 4, then a family forever. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe. New stories drop daily, each one proving that love finds those brave enough to ask. See you tomorrow.